Papias, an early Christian bishop who died in 140 AD, is often quoted so that it appears he knows of the Gospels of Mark and Matthew. If so, his extensive works were important and should have been preserved, but they were not. All we have are second-hand references from Christian bishop Irenaeus in the 2nd century AD and the church historian Eusebius in the 4th century AD. According to them, Papias speaks of a Gospel of Mark, but Papias also says Mark used the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel of Peter did not mention Pilate. It can't be the Gospel of Mark we have now. Papias refers to Matthew as the author of the Sayings of the Lord. This is a completely different work from the Gospel of Matthew, although the Gospel of Matthew quotes from it. The Sayings of the Lord are actually a collection of translations from previous Savior gods and mystery schools. What Christian apologists also don't mention is that both Irenaeus and Papias claim Jesus lived to a very old age. To them it was blasphemy to say that Jesus was crucified at about 30 years of age. The Roman historian Pliny the Younger is said to have mentioned troublesome Christianity in a letter to the Emperor Trajan in 110 AD. But just 24 years later, in 134 AD, the Emperor Hadrian refers to these same Christianity as followers of the Egyptian god Serapis. Serapis had his own temple in Alexandria. Serapis is one of the many cult gods whose priests were competing for the Christ title and supremacy over all other religions. By the end of Hadrian's reign in 138 AD, the population of Alexandria was about 50% Jewish, including the Samaritans. This is how the religious struggle between the various Jewish sects first moved out of Israel into the rest of the world. Ignatius was among the earliest of Christians who argued for a Jesus who had really existed. Like Justin Martyr, Ignatius never refers to or quotes Mark, Matthew, Luke, or John. Ignatius is the first to mention Mary's virgin birth and Pilate, but does not mention Joseph or the miracles. When fully examined, the evidence of Papias and Ignatius confirms that the overall gospel story was still being manufactured by the time of Papias' death in 140 AD. In addition to making Nazareth Jesus' hometown, Luke adds other elements trying to turn Jesus into a historical figure. Marcion wrote, saying the Son of Man must suffer many things and be put to death, and after 3 days rise again. Luke adds, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and scribes. The author of Luke admits there were many versions of the story before his. The Gospel of Luke was specifically addressed to Theophilus, who some scholars believe to be the Christian bishop of Antioch between 169 and 177 AD. The identification is based on Luke's calling Theophilus Kratistos, a word for men of prominent rank or office. In 180 AD, over a century after the crucifixion, Theophilus was the first to actually put in writing the names of the 4 gospel authors. The Gospel of Mark is sometimes dated to 64 AD. This is because scholars believe the author is writing before the first Roman destruction of Jerusalem. But in the earliest manuscripts, the author makes clear mistakes on the geography of Palestine. These geographical mistakes are not corrected until the King James Version. Given such mistakes, the writer of Mark could not have ever actually lived in Palestine. Mark begins his story with John the Baptist. John the Baptist was a mythical hero of the Nazarene faction and was added to include them in the new religion. Josephus mentions John the Baptist, but this appears to be yet another forgery. Scholars believe that Mark's original language was Latin and that he was a Roman convert rewriting the Latin version of Marcion's Gospel. The authors of Luke and Matthew used the Greek version of Marcion's Gospel. Church fathers Irenaeus and Jerome admit that the author of John was writing in opposition to the Gnostic Christian Cerinthius, who was popular beginning 145 AD. Scholars believe that John and Matthew were written to elevate the Roman Church above the others and take away the authority of the Gnostics. The author of John also makes several damaging mistakes. He names cities that never existed and makes errors in Judean geography and history. Unlike the other gospel writers, he places most of the action in Judea and Jerusalem, not in Galilee. Worst of all, the author makes a colossal geographical mistake about where John himself was born. John was claimed to have been born in Bethsaida, which the gospel places in Galilee. In reality, Bethsaida was never a part of Galilee. The author of John even admits he is writing propaganda for the purpose of building faith. In addition to supplying the false accusations against Herod, Matthew is the only gospel in which Jesus appoints Peter as the head of his church. Peter was not associated with the Roman Church until the end of the 2nd century AD. This is why early Roman writers like Justin Martyr never refer to him as the father of their church. The Gospel of Matthew can be shown to have been written by someone educated at the college in Alexandria who was not familiar with the geography of Palestine. In fact, most of the geographical mistakes in the New Testament occur because the 4 gospel authors appear to have sifted not only the words of Josephus for material, but also the Septuagint. The Septuagint is the ancient Greek version of the Old Testament. In drawing such material from the Old Testament, the authors of the Gospels mistakenly used names for cities and other areas that were either already mythical or had not existed for centuries. The author of John is claimed to be the author of the book of Revelation. Many original Christian sects rejected Revelation outright. The church historian Eusebius also disputed it, claiming it was not written by John. Revelation is originally an ancient Jewish text. It relates a year of 360 days, as does Genesis. False tales of early Christian martyrdom trace back to a passage supposedly written by the Roman historian Tacitus, in which he accused the Roman Emperor Nero of killing a great multitude of Christians in 64 AD. But no Christian apologist mentions this passage by Tacitus until the 15th century AD, leading historians to believe this entire work of Tacitus, called the Annals, is a much later forgery. Tacitus does not mention Christians in his more famous works. No author in Roman times makes any reference to or quotes from the Annals.